All right, we are live. Hey, somebody in the chat, I see Cowboy. I don't think he is still here because Cowboy says was here at 1:38 p.m. But a long time loyal Spunding und Wirt, somebody a pressure fermentation enthusiast is in the chat. Let me know if audio is good and everything like that. If you could, please. Jenny, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking water. I don't know if you remember. I'm having a baby here in a few months.
Absolutely. I'm drinking carbonated water and I'm not having a baby. So, I mean, well, and actually, I was, I do remember, and I will tell you this. Now, it's only because we're we're calling it a budding friendship. It took so much self-control because you don't want to like cross lines, but like the person the what I think is funny inside of my head is if I photoshopped my a tiny little version of my head onto the child that you currently have. Now, me, I think that's really funny, but then at the same time, not knowing you super well or your husband, I thought I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to do that. But anyway,
he would have definitely thought it was funny as well.
I don't want to be like crossing any lines here, but well, listen, Jenny, it sounds like our audio. Yes, and there's a running joke. It may have been from one of the first live streams that I did, Jenny, when I mentioned having 6 children, and somebody in the chat said, Adam makes beer, more like Adam makes babies. So that is that's a little thing from the chat that popped up there. Hey chat, welcome everybody. It's good to see so many of those familiar names popping in here. If you have been around for the Industry Pro interview conversation good time live stream, that is the official title. You know that sometimes I just get so much wrapped up in the conversation. I'm not always super good at keeping an eye on the chat, but please do drop those questions in there. I had a couple of questions come up that that I'll try to fit in here today into our conversation. But before we go too much further, this is Adam Makes Beer. My name is Adam. And as I just mentioned, this is June 2023 Industry Pro live stream. And today we're going to be talking to Jenny Reed from 50 West, brewer at 50 West. But before we get into the interview, let's talk about my wonderful sponsor. Blickman Engineering has been the pioneer of nano brewing, and they have helped hundreds of successful breweries achieve their dreams since they started with 1-barrel systems in 2006. Now offering a full suite of brew houses up to 15-barrel skidded and insulated, matching cellaring equipment, keg washers, grain mills, and more, sized specifically for the nano brewer. Blickman Pro brewing systems are competitively priced without sacrificing quality, and the simple design and factory direct support from our brewing experts gets you up and running faster than anything else on the market. When you're ready to go pro or just kicking the tires, be sure to reach out to them for expert advice and a partner to help you through it all. Turn your dreams into a reality by reaching out to Phil, Tom, or Josh at Pro Series at blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's Pro Series at blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering Pro Brewing is proud to be the equipment sponsor for this channel and is committed to helping every brewer, no matter where they are in their journey. Jenny, I feel like a real pro when I read that.
You sound really good doing it.
So the funny thing is there's a dear friend of mine that is always he watches all the live streams. After a lot of them, he's a brewer friend of mine. We'll jump on and we'll talk beer or just catch up on life after these live streams. And we had a conversation a few weeks ago about how he did a radio interview once, and he went into the studio, met the host guy, and they were talking. Everything was normal. But then as soon as they went live, the guy was talking like this. And he said there was like no warning or anything like that. So now when I do that live read, this is what I think is going to happen. Is like, I don't want to be monotone, but I also don't want to be like insane radio voice. But anyhow, well, listen, everybody, Jenny was I was mentioning before, I don't know if we were live or not at that point, but most of the people that you have, every person that I have done a brewer interview with is somebody that I've known for pretty much about 10 years, and they're dear friends and everything like that. And I have met Jenny through us doing collabs with 50 West over the last few years between Cartridge and 50 West. We do the Sip Trip collaboration where, obviously we collab on a beer. We share a bike trail, and we have like a thing between them and whatnot. So I've gotten to know Ryan over there at 50 West, and he's, the first time we went over to 50 to brew, he was talking up this brewer at, is it pronounced Chillicothe? Because I'm new to the...
Yeah, Chillicothe.
Chillicothe. He is talking about this brewer that they have over at Chillicothe named Jenny, who he couldn't say enough positive things about you. And then we ended up meeting this past year for Sip Trip Volume 3 and had a chance to chat a little bit. And yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being willing to talk to me tonight.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So you have, I think, and it might sound silly, but I feel like a lot of people get into the industry by, maybe they were working front of house and they had interest in getting back into the brewery, or they were home brewing and then kind of got their foot in the door with a brewery. You ended up going the education route, and not only that, but you went to one of the more prestigious places here in the U.S. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your educational experience?
Yeah, well, I started a little bit later than a lot of people do in this industry. I didn't really start going this route until I was in my 30s already.
Okay.
So it really all started because my dad and me and my brother are super into craft beer. So like we would take trips just to go try craft beer from different places.
Sure.
And it was like one day we're like, we should just try it just for fun. So for a couple of years, we started doing some homebrew in our, it's actually my dad's driveway, I guess. So we just hang out. And of course, first few times you homebrew, it's like 12-hour process. You're hanging out in your driveway.
Yeah.
And then I just loved it.
So when you were homebrewing, was it like a turkey fryer outside?
Yeah, igloo coolers and turkey fryers.
Igloo cooler and turkey fryer. Heck yeah, man. That's a sweet way to do it. I when I was homebrewing, I still, the whole time, I only brewed in our kitchen with my wife. So we lived in that house for close to 20 years. When we sold that house, I still think that there is some black scarring from a boil over on that white porcelain surface that you can't quite get off. So what was that homebrew rig like? So you had the igloo cooler, you had the turkey fryer.
Yeah, we had 2 igloo coolers. So we had the hot liquor tank igloo cooler and then the mash tun with the little false bottom. So, and then we rigged up some like steps so it would gravity feed. Like we really did a lot with it, but it was fun. I mean, you got what you got out of that. You don't really get to regulate much.
What did you have going on the fermentation side as far as fermentation vessel, temperature control, anything?
We did not really have any temperature control. We put it in my dad's basement in a 5-gallon bucket with a little airlock on it. And,
yeah.
I mean, it was very rudimentary, I guess.
Heck yeah.
So some of it was good, some of it was not fit to drink, and you wasted your whole day plus a few weeks trying to ferment it. But
do you remember the first beer that was it? So it was the three of you, dad and brother.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful thing, by the way. Just to say, I love I love that it was the three of you doing that.
Yeah, the first thing we did like an out-of-the-box extract kit because we were just trying to make sure everything was working properly. It was like, I don't want to spend a bunch of time doing all grain if it's not going to work out.
Yeah.
So we did a amber ale.
Yeah.
Turned out fine.
I did an English ale. I had the English ale box, so you had amber ale. All right. Yep.
And everyone's like, "Did you like it?" I was like, "I'm not a huge amber ale person, but it tasted fine."
It was my first batch was identifiable as beer.
Yeah.
It was also oxidized, and my palate was so uninformed at that time for me to taste oxidation in that beer. It had to be horribly oxidized. But you know what I mean? But yeah, that's a cool thing. And so you started doing some home brewing with the fam, and that's cool. And so, but you were mentioning that you didn't get into the beer side of thing until your 30s. What was going on with your 20s, career wise?
Well, I started out in my 20s. I was doing freshwater mussel research for Ohio State University. It was a grant-funded position, and it was one of those things every year. It was just a battle of whether I was going to get my grant refunded. So I ended up going and getting a job at Ohio University in the bursar's office. So I did student loan collections at the bursar's office. So
does that sounds rough? Is that rough?
It was not fun. I had a lot of students tell me that I was ruining their lives, and it didn't take me long to realize I didn't want to do that forever.
If we haven't known each other for very long, but sometimes I feel like I laugh inappropriately. And this is, you have to take my laughter with a grain of salt on this. I'm laughing at how difficult of a situation that had to be, because that can't be a good feeling.
No, you don't ever really want to hear somebody say that. So I mean, I loved working there. Ohio University was a great place to work.
Sure.
But I just didn't want to do collections. It just wasn't my thing. After, working as a freshwater mussel, I was out in like creeks and rivers all the time. So I was outside. I wasn't stuck to a desk.
Yeah.
And then I moved offices to get away from that and did some like budgeting stuff there for a while. And I was like, I still just don't like being inside, sitting at a desk all the time. It's not what I want to do forever.
Sure.
So when I was 30, I was married, but I didn't have any kids yet. I was like, if I'm going to make this switch that I really want to do to this, passion that I have for brewing, I need to do it now. So I did some research of like different schools and different things that I was actually qualified for. And I found UC Davis. I talked to some of the people that had been there before. I just thought it was going to be a really good experience. So I applied. I did get put on the wait list because there's a lot of students that try to go in there a lot. So once I got in, I was like, all right, I gotta go. I gotta do this. This is something I want to do, because I was 30. I think I was 30 at the time that I got in.
Okay.
And being a female in our industry, there's not as many of them. And I live in Southern Ohio. Like,
sure,
there's not a lot of breweries in my area. So really, we have a few in Athens. We have one in Jackson, and now we have two in Chillicothe. Those are the closest places, and those are still like 30 to 40 minutes away from where I live. So it's like,
sure,
I need to feel confident going in there telling these people that this is what I want to do. I'm committed to it, and having some like knowledge behind it, I felt like was really, really going to help. So I wanted to make sure I was ready for the commitment and showing that this is really what I wanted to do. So
sure. And I think there is something too, and without sounding ageist, there is something about like, I mean, you made an adult decision, you made an adult move, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes I feel like, I mean, I don't know about you going into college, but I think I had 3 or 4 different majors. I mean, I know I like wanted to work with kids and help kids. But I mean, that can come in many different forms, right? And so, you know, when you're young and you're making decisions, I mean, shoot, I ended up, well, I taught history, high school, at risk kids, high school aged for the first 10 years of my career. And, but you know, I ended up becoming, I was a history major and then had my education. It was basically like a certification that was tacked on. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I picked history because I had to pick a major. Like it was at the end of my sophomore year, and I was as close to that as I was anything else. And I just had a great history class. And so that was, you know what I mean? So like in your situation, you've been in the workforce and you're making a substantial decision. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think that says something. And so now, how many years have you been brewing professionally?
It's almost 4 now. So 4? I started right before COVID, which might have been the worst possible time to make that transition. I started in the January 2020. So I think I worked for like 3 months before the world shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. I got in. Well, I decided to move my family 6 hours away in August of 2020. To help start a new brewery. So yeah, we can feel some of that together a little bit. Those are uncertain times for I mean, obviously so many of us. I mean, especially on that hospitality side, you know, because we had weird, and because I mean, I'm not trying to say that restaurant brewery industry was any different for you know, as far as the pandemic went. But the strange thing with our industry is we tried to pretend to be open, like on the restaurant front, like back in Michigan, and our lockdown stuff was I believe tighter, but they would say restaurants can open to 25% capacity. Okay. And it's like, well, you still need 100% of the kitchen staff. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like things get tricky. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And so it's just weird times. But yeah, so you got in right when everything kind of clamped down. That's wild.
Yeah, it definitely was. So since I was commuting back and forth between southeastern Ohio and Cincinnati like 3 days a week, there for about a month, I think I just didn't go in to work at all. Yeah. And then I came back and I was having a baby, my first baby. So it actually worked out really well because the Chillicothe renovation essentially got put on hold because of all of the like supply chain stuff. Sure. So like getting the elevator in the new building and all of the equipment and all that stuff just kind of stopped during all of that. The construction kind of stopped because we were supposed to open in like March or April of 2020, and we didn't end up opening until January of 2021. So I had my son Christmas Eve of 2020, and then I came back in March, and then we started brewing at the Chillicothe location in April. Okay. It actually worked out really nicely because we weren't ready to brew there until right after I got back. So sure. Even though I didn't plan it, I couldn't have planned it better, essentially. So sure. So you went straight from did you go straight from graduating UC Davis to working for 50 West? My actual first time brewer's job, yes. But I interned at Little Fish with Sean over there in Athens. Nice. I was trying to think when I started there, maybe like August. Yeah. And then I worked with him until I started my actual job in January. And since I was only part-time at 50 West, I still went over maybe 1 day a week and like cleaned kegs and hung out and just kind of helped where I could. Bottling days, I'd help him. Yeah. Fruit processing days because he does a lot of sours and barrels. So it was great experience. He's a great brewer. I learned a lot there. So
very cool. We need those people, right? I'm such a big believer in that. I think, and maybe it's not industry specific, but I do think I don't know. I feel like we owe it to each other on some level, right?
Absolutely. And this industry is so open and friendly for the most part. Like, everyone likes to collab. Everyone likes to share the information they have. Like, it's just a nice industry to be in.
It's true. It's true. Well, I'm jumping a little bit ahead here because we're starting to roll from school into work. So let's jump back to the school stuff a little bit. Why did you end up choosing UC Davis? Because there's other schools out there.
Well, it fit with what I wanted. Mm-hmm. It was a good school, and it was only 6 months. So mm-hmm. having a husband, having a house, and all that, like, I had to give up my income and give up, living with my husband essentially, because he stayed here and worked. So I knew it was only 6 months. So I moved to California from January until July.
That's wild. How, like, and you don't have to get super personal. That had to be challenging.
It definitely was. I will say that the school was so intensive. Like, you woke up in the morning, went to school, you were there till 5 o'clock. Then you had to pretty much go home and do classwork or whatever kind of studying you needed to do.
Yep.
So it kept me very busy. So I think that helped with that. Sure. But it was definitely different because I had never lived more than like 2 hours away from where I grew up. I went to school in Columbus.
Okay.
But that was the furthest I'd ever lived away from everybody that I knew. So I moved out to California and didn't really know anybody. I roomed with a girl that I went to school with. But there was 10 years age difference between me and my roommate too.
How many?
10 years.
10 years. Yeah, that's a little bit of a difference,
Yeah, for sure. So she had just graduated college, and I was like, yeah, I graduated college 10 years ago.
So the program fit, and so it was a 6-month, pretty intense thing. I mean, there's obviously some big names teaching over there. When we talked before, I believe, there's Dr. Bamforth is over there. Dr. Lewis is over there, but they may have been gone by the time you were there.
Dr. Lewis was gone. I had Bamforth his last year there before he went over to Sierra Nevada.
Yeah, I could listen to him read the phone book.
Oh, he was amazing. I mean, everything he said just sounded even better because of his accent. It's like, I'll never get tired of hearing you talk.
Sure. And, he still has one of my favorite. I remember, I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast, The Brewing Network, but they started releasing stuff back in 2005. And that's where I got a ton of my brewing knowledge from them interviewing industry pros and stuff, and even folks on the homebrew side for that matter. And I remember they interviewed Charlie. They had him on a few times. And he talked about when he was working for, one of the light lager companies, mass-produced light lager, and he always says gently flavored beer. It's a gently flavored lager. Yeah. I always like that because, first of all, I think it's hilarious because you know how people, especially on our side of the industry, tend to talk about those beers. Mm-hmm. So I love the fine point that it puts on it without anyways, that always cracks me up.
He always had extreme opinions on different beer styles. If you did anything hazy, he's like, I'm not drinking this chicken soup.
Yeah.
This is not what I want. This is not beer. He said, I worked so many years to get my beer as clear as possible. Why would I do this?
Well, and then what was I've also heard him talk about that. Yeah, because I mean, for a lot of it, I mean, yeah, he was helping in the production of gently flavored lagers, and he was talking about clarity issues at one point, and he used the term fluffy bottoms, where they would get the beer into the can or into the bottle. And somewhere along the lines in the process, they would end up with like a fluffy sediment that would settle out at the bottom of the can. Or a bottle or whatever, but yeah, fluffy bottoms. That's another one that sticks in my head with him.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, Davis is known for having really really big names out there. So, I mean, if you could, I get questions all the time about whether or not somebody should pursue school or anything like that as far as getting into the industry. Could you share like just what the experience was like for you? Just from because I think that there's going to be people that will listen to this and just want to know, well, okay, if I do get accepted to that program, what should I be expecting?
In regards to the program, I mean, it is very, very intensive. You wake up every morning and you go in at 8, I think it was started, and you're there until 5 o'clock. And it is constant lectures. You take quizzes almost every day on different subjects. They do have a sensory program, which was really helpful, I think, because coming from just a homebrew aspect, I was kind of like you, like something might be wrong with this beer.
Sure.
Could not tell you what it was. Like, so they have the sensory kits, and you do that like once a week for the different kind of sensory programs. Very yeast intensive as well. We have, classes that you just concentrated on all the different kinds of yeast, all of the different, infections that you can get, where they're from. So to me, it was really important to have all of that, because coming from a couple years of homebrew, I was not prepared to go anywhere and brew on my own.
Sure. Sure.
So I think for me at my stage, I wasn't going to be able to like learn all of that from just brewing experience, like hands-on. Sure. However, I also think if I didn't have somebody like Ryan and Scott and Sean show me the ropes of brewing, just because I have this degree doesn't mean I could just start my own place and brew. Like, that's not really realistic either.
I think yeah, I'm sorry, continue.
I say the only thing that I think I didn't get covered in my brewing program that I wish I had is more like recipe development. We only had 2 weeks in an actual brewery out of the 6 months that I was there.
I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, because for me, and so this is my arc in learning how to recipe develop. When I was, let me see. All right, it's not right here. It's not a book on my shelf right now. It's actually at work because I still use it. When I was homebrewing, I would only brew recipes from the book called Brewing Classic Styles by John Palmer and Jamil Zainashek. And I will say this: I think you can take those recipes with the exception of a few things, American IPA, some of the sour beer approaches in there. There's a couple of things that have been updated technique wise over time.
Sure.
But you can take those historical styles in there, scale them up and brew them, and damn if you're not almost in the pocket for what that beer style is supposed to be. Like it's really a good guide. I learned to recipe develop by brewing those recipes and figuring out how he builds flavor with stuff. Like I always say, like, instead of reading that like a recipe book, I got to the point to where I was reading it like a story.
Yeah.
Right. So you could look at how he's making German beer and you can see common themes, or in a style where you want to build up kind of a toasty, not quite roasty profile in it.
Yeah.
And you can see how he does those things. And so, I mean, that's almost everything I brewed at home. Yeah. And then it's just your own back catalog once you start brewing something, right? So
absolutely. You definitely go back to the things that really worked for you and just kind of tweak those after you get a little bit underneath your, in your pocket, I guess.
Sure. Do you ever taste something that you have on tap and then riff off of that? Like make tweaks off of something else. So
yeah,
like for instance, that's the primary way that I judge balance with IPA now. Okay. Is because I feel like with the calculations, especially because we have some IPAs where, if I'm dropping the whirlpool temperature down to 170, I have a rough, I mean, I might have a guesstimate about what's going to come out of that from a balance standpoint, but it's not like you're punching that into a calculator and getting like a super hardcore number off of it. So like, I will go out and taste another beer that I whirlpooled down at 170, and then I'll look at those volumes and kind of tweak from there a little bit, right?
Absolutely. You just kind of see, and I think that with all the hops that you use, especially when you're like combining different dry hops, there's certain dry hops that just overtake your whole thing. And I'm like, I wasted this other one because I can't even taste it. So it's like trial and error, essentially. Like, I've dry hop stuff with Sabro before, as everybody knows. You only do that one time because whatever you do dry hop with it, you can't taste it unless you do like half Sabro and the rest. So.
Yeah. So, before I take us too far away from school, I mean, what was really, I mean, if you had to think of one or a couple of things that were really the thing that you are most grateful for with that experience at Davis?
I think now, like being 3 years into the industry, you know, essentially running my own brew pub, the thing I'm most grateful for is when something goes wrong, I know what's going on. Like, I have a fix for it. I'm able to determine. Whereas, like, I think if I had just went in and learned the process and not learned the science behind it, I might not really know what I did to mess up my beer. So like, and like, I don't know, all of the science, like the amylase and, you know, all of the components of the enzymes that break down, like if I would have accidentally brewed too hot or mashed too hot or something like that, it's like, I wouldn't have known what I was doing wrong and why it didn't work. So I think that's one of the things, like actually learning what is happening during this brewing process, not just that it works. So I think that whenever I was home brewing, I was like, this is what the recipe said to do. It worked. I got the right amount of sugars out of it. But, you know, I also, of course, with homebrew, you could accidentally mash a lot hotter. The first time I was doing it, my probe, like it was in the grain. So it was like saying one temperature, which it was not that temperature. So I mashed way too hot. It was nowhere close to what I thought I was going to get. And I was like, I have no idea why. So it's like, you do eventually learn that stuff, but I feel like having that formal education, hearing all of, and that's the other thing, you hear stories from these teachers that you have. And they had people come in, like we had Vinny come in and do a presentation. We had Ken Grossman come in and do a presentation.
That's awesome.
Our classroom was right there with Sudworks, so their brewers came in and did stuff. So a lot of local people that have breweries out there, which they're everywhere out in that area. It was just really, really nice, not only to hear their stories about how they opened places and like all of the trials and tribulations they essentially went through, but you know, they told stories about why things didn't work or how things didn't work. And it's like, you almost learn more from the things that didn't work out than from the things that did. Because if it just works, it's like, all right, that was good. But if you have an issue, then you know what to do the next time and not have that same issue.
Yeah. And that's always kind of what most of the people that I have worked with are, they don't have any background at all. Maybe they've homebrewed, but they've never, but even that would be, but even that's minimal. Most of my people are completely new to making beer. And I think there's some real benefits to that in some ways. Because you don't have to worry about, and sometimes you say it and it might sound wrong, but or it might sound like big-headed, but you don't want people coming in with bad habits.
Absolutely.
And not that I'm the flawless brewer or anything like that, but you know, I try to learn, I try to grow, I try to stay current. And for some people, it's just a job. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And it's a job where there's free beer after work, and it's like a scene. You know what I mean? And it's, you know, it's kind of like this connection to like bar life or something, except you're one of the people that makes it.
Yeah, it's a fun job to say you have. You can go around and say, I make beer for a living. And people think it's really, really cool.
It's true. It's true. I always, because it's not a joke, but I mean, I taught at-risk kids for 10 years and nobody ever wanted to interview me. I made one batch of beer professionally and the local paper wants to interview me. It's an interesting, an interesting twist, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So
but I definitely think there is an aspect of that. Like, and I hope I didn't come off as when I went in with Ryan, like I still pretty much said, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I know the science behind the process, but when I came to go, learn from him, I learned a lot because it was something completely new in regards to professional big batch brewing.
Yeah.
I had tried to use some of the stuff in my homebrew setting, but I would say I wouldn't be where I am now without all of the information and knowledge I've gained from Ryan. He was a great asset to me.
Definitely.
And I'm very, very thankful for it.
And, it's, I don't know. That's just, yeah, I think that's so cool. And there is that bridge. So I remember one of the people that I trained into the industry. It was my buddy Andy. He was on and talked about hazy IPA. We did an interview with him on hazy, which if you haven't watched, I'm not telling you, Jenny, even though what I'm about to say is true. If you have not watched the chat that I had with Andy, the full video is in the live stream portion of the playlist, but it's really worthwhile. Andy's very, very thorough, and even if the way he's doing hazy is not exactly how you want to be doing it, it's so valuable to see behind the scenes with somebody else and to hear their thought process and talk through their full actual process. It's just great stuff. So that one is with Andy Gallagher from Linwood Brewing when we talked hazy. So definitely check that out. But so what was the thing about Davis that you found out, but you had no idea it was going to be like that? Like, what was the big surprise going to Davis? Because maybe like I'm one of those people, and I see my 12-year-old do it. And when we have friends coming over to the house, he's pacing, he's nervous, he's looking out the window. Like you would almost expect he's expecting us to get robbed, but really he's just so excited that his friends are coming over that he's all wound up. And I do the same thing. And I always think, well, even like I went to CBC and I'm always thinking, well, what's it gonna be like when I'm there?
Yeah.
And like
yeah.
So, I mean, did you have kind of that thing going into it where you're kind of wondering what the whole thing was going to be like, and then there was something about the experience that surprised you or anything like that?
I mean, I talked to quite a few people that had been to the program, so I kind of knew what to expect, like school-wise. So, I mean, the only thing that I wasn't really expecting, we had an engineering part of this too.
Okay.
Which was not my strong suit. No, I was always like, I'm good at math. I was always like, this won't be hard.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. All of the things about all of the pumps and the equipment and that stuff.
Yeah.
It was a lot. So that part was very it was good. I had got a lot of good information. I was a lot more prepared when I went into places to see all this equipment.
Sure.
But that was a little bit surprising to me. And then I guess also like the brewing part with Charlie Banforth, I was expecting all that, all the processes and, the things that you did to retain foam, head retention, that's his absolute favorite thing to talk about.
Yes. Pour with vigor.
Exactly. I was expecting all of that. Some of the yeast stuff was even more in depth than I was anticipating. We had to learn every kind of infection that you could see. You had to learn the shapes and all that. So, I mean, some of that was more intense than I was expecting, but Overall, like I said, I kind of knew what to expect because I'd talked to a lot of people. But those things were a little bit surprising. I was also a little bit surprised of all the people that we got to meet and all the stories that we got to hear, just like the guest speakers.
Yeah.
But, for the most part, it was pretty much what I was expecting because I did so much research before I went out there.
Sure. Well, good for you. I mean, yeah, that's awesome. So that kind of leads me to the next thing. And I always feel like, I don't know why I feel so weird when I use the word networking. But I think it can kind of come off as like a corny kind of sounding thing. But I think one of the things that I never realized when I was in college, and only started realizing it later, is, there's value to the people of having relationships with other people in the industry.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the reasons why I'm a little bit allergic to the idea of, quote unquote networking is I don't like the salesperson persona can be a little much for me.
Yeah.
Like, especially when like you're not even in the workplace, you're not even the same industry, and they're still selling. That's that one that's really challenging for me. And sometimes I connect that idea of networking. But I mean, do you feel as if that the experience at UC Davis kind of built up that professional network on the brewing side for you some?
I think it made it easier for me to be able to feel confident talking to other people about brewing.
Sure.
And I do know a lot of people from my program that are in different places across the United States now as well. Yeah. And so I absolutely feel like it was beneficial because I could call up quite a few of the people that I went to school with, and they would be able to like answer questions or help me out, or
it's
whatever.
So valuable. It's so valuable. I've got 3-4 people that when stuff comes up, or pardon me, or if I'm trying a new ingredient, I'm trying a new process, I'm always hitting up my people that I know that are doing things. That you can get that hive mind working on something, and it's just so valuable. It's just so valuable.
I was talking to Ryan today, and he said, "Yeah, I had to call up Adam yesterday so he could tell me." I was like, "It is. You get these people that you trust, and they make good beer and they have good processes, and you just know that they'll have the right answer for you. And if they don't have it, they'll know somebody that has it for you." Sure.
Yeah, it was funny because he was hitting me up about that. We use that dry hop doser. Mm-hmm. Like it straps right on top of the tank and everything. You can purge it. It's pressurizable. And he asked me one simple question, and I think I sent him 7 texts and a link to a video. Of course, my own video, right? But I mean, like, I always feel a little bit weird doing that for people, but also I really want somebody to understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not like I'm just sending out, my own videos to people randomly. Yeah. Like, oh, hey, grandma, hope you had a good day. Here's how we dry hop.
Well, I will tell you, we got a new packaging guy, and he is a real go-getter. He's done a lot for us, and he was telling us all about these videos he's been watching on YouTube about brewing and all these experiences. And Ryan's like, is that Adam Makes Beer? And he's like, yeah, I think it is. It's like, that is hilarious. I love this.
That's cool. One of the things that's been really nice about doing this is, I did teach for 10 years. I did teach some university level courses for brewing. And I tell you what, this is my favorite angle on what I'm doing, because I love to teach, and it keeps me hungry and learning and trying new things. It gets me talking to people that I probably like. If I didn't do this channel, you and I wouldn't be talking beer tonight. Like at some point in the future, like we might, but like, I need to talk to people, and I have to schedule it. And so it's just really cool, and it lets me know like the things that I have to learn. And because, a friend of mine just hit me up, and he was questioning some of the, he was digging into some of the water stuff that I was talking about, and he was like, well, I'm not sure if that's like completely correct. And he sent me some stuff. So I've got more stuff to do, and I'm probably going to send an email to John Palmer and ask him like, hey, I'm doing this with my water. Am I jacked up? You know what I mean? So, but yeah.
I think that's the fun thing about this industry too, is like, if you want to keep learning, you absolutely can. There's new processes that come out all the time. Even learning from like the old books and the old processes, like there is so much information that you could get, and everyone is really free with it. Like this worked for me, this didn't work for me. I mean, I went to CBC this year as well, and just hearing things like from Vinny about how they're doing different kinds of hop products now. And it's like, there's just always so many new things that you could try if you are willing to research it and get out there and try it.
Sure. They did, and people, the 18 people that are watching right now may be tired of me talking about this episode, but if you have not listened to the interview that they did on Craft Beer and Brewing, that podcast, have you ever listened to that podcast before? They did. They've done a follow-up in the meantime, but they did one with Vinny and a couple other high-level ballers that I can't ever remember their name, but they're high-level ballers. They don't need the ego stroke of me remembering their name. But on West Coast IPA, and it was probably an hour and a half, 2 hour show on producing West Coast IPA, and it was amazing. Like super. Oh, I'm telling you, it's one to put at the top of your list, because to be able to hear somebody like Vinny, like you're talking about, the confidence, whether he's talking hop products or specifically things that they're doing with West Coast IPA right now. I am hoping, I've been trading emails with him. I am hoping to maybe in August or September to be interviewing him. And I want to talk lager with him, because I feel like everybody talks IPA with him. And I'm such a lager nerd. I want to talk to him about his pills.
His pills are delicious. STS pills is one of my favorite things to drink when I was out there.
Yes. Now, do they run multiple lagers around there, or no? Or is it really just STS?
That was the one that I saw mostly in like the grocery stores.
Yeah.
I did a couple tours there. We did one for school, and then I had my dad and brother actually came out and visited. So we went to their Windsor location and their Santa Rosa location and got to try a bunch of different stuff while we were there too. So it was really fun. I actually got to be out there during Pliny the Younger too, because that comes out in January. So that was a really fun experience.
That's wild.
Stood in line for 2 hours. I'll tell you, the best thing that I saw while I was there, though, these little girls were selling Girl Scout cookies in this line of like hundreds of drunk people. These girls have it going on. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I like that. So I had the good fortune, this was probably back in 2013, 2014. I went out and did podcasts with the Brewing Network. So me and a couple of my buddies flew out to California, and Justin, the main guy there at the Brewing Network, he's well connected with the local guys. So we got a tour of Lagunitas with Jeremy Marshall, and then he took us over to Russian River, and Vinny came out. Vinny had just got done working like a 10-hour shift, like on the bottling line. He came out, and it wasn't a situation where he's just wanting to have a beer. He had a small pour of his pale ale, and he sat there for 90 minutes and answered the same questions that everybody's been asking him for the last 15 years. And such a kind man. And really, 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 just a nice guy. And I just love, there's a few things that I love about him, but I just love when you listen to, if you do get a chance, check that interview out with him, because I just love listening to somebody who, for me, is like one of those Mount Rushmore type characters when it comes to the American scene. I love listening to him being hungry and like just wanting to get better. You know what I mean? And like, I just love that. I love it.
He's been in the industry a long time to still have that drive to keep doing things better, changing things. Yeah. And he doesn't just do it for him. He does it and then shares it with everybody else too. Like,
sure. Well, and that's
like he's just making his brand better. He wants to make the industry better, which is nice.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I was looking at it because when I was trying to think, well, do I want to talk to him? You know, if I do get him on, do I want to talk IPA? And I was realizing so much of this stuff is him talking hoppy beers, and of course, you know, I mean, you know, he knows what he's talking about, right? Makes great hoppy beer, but like, I mean, he's patient, and there's a lot of stuff. He has a fair amount of stuff out there, so I mean, he's talking to people regularly, so it's not just like, you know, he gets 1 or 2 requests a year to be talking to people, you know.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and he still makes time to be at all of his events too. Like when I was standing in line for 2 hours to go try Pliny the Younger, him and his wife were walking around to everybody in the line, shaking hands, you know, thanking people for being there. Like he does a lot for his brand as well as doing all the interviews and stuff. So,
and I think he has the understanding of. And when I talk to my wife about what I'm doing with the channel, like the interesting thing is to me is like the diehard people that watch all my stuff, they like the content and they like the information, but they like me.
Yeah,
like they like a person, right? Like, and that sounds weird. Like
no,
they like me, but they connect with the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
That's actually like, and I mean that's really, I mean that's what you're in some ways. Yeah, I want to. I love it when I get messages. I got a message from a brewery owner who had a brewer. They were getting ready to open. The brewer left, and they had to start making beer, and so he just started watching my videos, and he was able to hack his way through it. Like that's great, because that guy's got a lot of they've got a lot of money on the line. You know what I mean? And I feel like there should be free stuff out here. Like, and this is one of the things I don't understand, and thankfully I don't have a big enough platform that anyone would ever care. But how does the Brewers Association not have free instructional YouTube videos?
Yep.
And because, and not on your own platform. I'm sorry, Brewers Association. All the talks that you have on your website are impossible to find. It's super difficult. It's very, very hard to find information. Have a YouTube channel, or don't, because it might benefit me if you don't. But have a YouTube channel that actually shows people in real time how to handle chemical, how a pub brewer can clean and sanitize a tank safely. And you can do those things generally. You can say, like I say, use your chemical suppliers recommendations for this, for time, temperature, duration, you know, concentration. What, like, so you don't have to put yourself on the hook from a legality standpoint, but this industry is dying to have somebody say, hey, this is how you can do this. Right. And so anyway, and then I get a little preachy, but but anyways, that stuff drives me crazy. But anyways, yeah, I mean, that's that. I think I get wound up about once a live stream, and so hopefully that's the only time where I go a little bit over the line. One of the things I did want to point out from the chat, which was a comment that I enjoyed. Jamie Tripp, long time listener, Jamie Tripp. Jenny, you are an inspiration to anyone who is looking to make a change at any point. Good on you. When you were talking about making your move into the brewing industry, Very cool stuff. Jamie's a good dude. He is opening a brewery of his own as we speak. So yeah, some cool stuff there. But before we start talking about making tart fruited beer, is there any other big picture things or anything else that you would just like to convey about that experience at Davis?
I mean, I will be forever grateful that I went, I think is my biggest thing. I don't think that I would have had the confidence to go in and get the job that I have without it. Yep. I would have had to definitely.
Might have a little freeze. Jenny is frozen. I wonder what I do. Oh, you know what? Hold on just a second. I think I know what to do. Oh, yeah. Click back in. We'll see if she can jump back in. Hey!
Can you see me again?
I gotcha.
No idea. Home internet is not the best, obviously.
Well, I mean, more than anything, I was what I can also tell that I've been doing this for a little over a year because I did not start to just sweat profusely because that's what used to happen all the time. I never knew how to actually make the stream start or whatever, and like I was always very tense. So I'm far more relaxed. I'm like, you know what? This will work itself out, and it did. What were we chatting about before we froze up?
We were just saying like anything else that I had.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I was really glad that I did what I did, mostly because I started so late. So it's like I felt confident being able to go in and actually apply for a brewer's job instead of feeling like I didn't have the knowledge that I needed to go in and do that. So I'm going to be forever grateful for going. I don't think it has to be everybody's process. I think that you can absolutely go in, especially like under you. Every time I talk to you, you've learned a new process. You keep going in and you know all the science behind it. Like if you have a good teacher to go in and teach you all that stuff, I think it's absolutely possible to go in and become a brewer without having to have any kind of formal education. But I think that for me, it's like it gave me that confidence to go in and know that if I did something, I was going to be able to fix it or have that background. So I think
that's an interesting angle, and because I didn't really see that because I was thinking on such a practical plane with it. But I think that's really interesting that you mentioned that, you know, actually one of the big things just was that level of confidence, walking into that interview and talking to somebody and saying, yeah, hey, I did this.
Absolutely. Being able to go in and have the questions too. Like if I would have went into the interview with Scott and been like, oh, well, I homebrewed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even known what kind of questions to ask him. Like,
sure.
And then when he asked me questions, I don't know that I would have had the right answers either. So
yeah,
it just lets you know. And like I said earlier, it's like, I wanted people to know I was serious about it. Like it wasn't a whim. It wasn't something I just kind of decided this sounds like fun. Like I want to tell people I make beer, kind of like
yeah.
So
and it's a commitment difference too, because you know if it's something, you know, I don't know, like for me, one of my old assistants who's now brewing over at Urban Artifact, like She worked with me. We have had and have a great relationship. And then it's always one of those things where it's like, well, do you like it because we get along great?
Yeah.
Or is this going to be your career?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And now she's out there, she's killing it over at Urban, and she's out there doing it, and I'm very proud and everything like that. But yeah.
I think I met her at the Ohio Craft Brewers conference that we had in Cincinnati like 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah. Oh yeah. She is, if there is, did you ever watch the show Parks and Rec?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So if Leslie Knope and a Care Bear had a baby, that is, she radiates joy. And we played so well. Our personalities played so well off each other. You met Josh. We would just constantly try to get a reaction out of him, and he's very stoic.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was like two children trying to compete for the authority figures. Even though he was the junior most person in the brewery. We're like, hey Josh, you think this is funny? But yeah. So but she's a sweetheart.
Having people like that you work with absolutely makes going into work even better.
Well, and the first time Ryan came over was because we brewed Sip Trip 1 at our place, and I had never met Ryan before, and this collab was set up by other. I don't know, I didn't know anybody. I think Ryan might be the first brewer that I met in Cincinnati.
Yeah,
and he came over, and it was me, Josh, and Maggie. We're just doing our thing. And that was one of the big compliments that he gave me after that. He was just like, coming in there and seeing the team you had and the way you communicated, and like you guys were having fun, you were working hard, and people were learning and they were asking questions. It was fun. And honestly, like probably that year and a half, that 18 months that I had with the two of them it's going to be the best it'll be the best thing that I'll ever have from a management position. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because it wasn't just the workers, it wasn't this that they could just come in and ball out like on the work side, but like even the personalities clicked. It's like, this is stupid. How can this be this good? Right. So it's one of those things you have to appreciate in the moment.
For sure.
But well, listen, let's jump into the brewing side of our conversation. And you had talked about maybe wanting to discuss brewing tart fruit beers.
Yes, that is one of the things that I like to brew the most right now. And it's mostly because the clientele in Chillicothe really like it. So I get good feedback of the things that they like that I've done, and even the things that I don't like, which is definitely a different perspective than what I ever had when I was just working in Cincinnati, because at Cincinnati, even when I worked at the pub, there was a wall with glass that was between me and the customers.
Yeah.
In Chillicothe, there's not. There is a half wall, and I'm right there in the main tap room. So, and I mean, I'll even, if we get super busy and I am like at a place that I can, I'll even stop and go pour beer and talk to our customers, which is a nice thing to do. Like, it's nice to hear what they say. And sometimes they don't know I'm the brewer. So I go and pour and they're like, ew, I don't like this. And I'm like, well, what don't you like about it? It's a great perspective to have, because it's like you get their honest reaction. People aren't just being nice and saying, yeah, I like it, because they like it. So.
What hours do you what hours of the day are you typically at the brewery?
I go in anywhere between 7 and like 9, just depending on what I'm doing that day, and then I'm there till about 4 or 5 every day. So
sure, yeah. So you do have that overlap. I will say, like, because there were times where at Cartridge and even other places that I worked, you're brewing when you're not open.
Yeah,
it's more fun to be open. There is something to a quiet brewery sometimes, though, but there is something to having things happen while people are there. And I think
if it's good things.
Yeah.
I have done a few things that I wish people weren't there for. I had a runaway hose one time that was spraying out into the tap room. And then I've had a few, you're dumping off all of the hops out of the bottom of your tank, getting ready to clean it, and it like sprays up in the air.
Yeah.
And it's like, please don't go into the tap room. So you have that instant panic, like it doesn't, and you like pop up to see if there was anybody on the other side of the wall that's gonna get hit by flying hops. Like
the first brewery I worked at, they had these 4 bright tanks that were up in a mezzanine that overlooked the restaurant, right? And you couldn't really, if you're in the brewery, the mezzanine was far enough away that you couldn't really hear very well. But anyways, I'm doing stuff in the brewery, and the buddy that was working with me was this guy Bill, and I end up hearing him yell. I think I hear somebody yelling Mills, and I'm like, what is that? And then I realized it's him up in the mezzanine. He was moving it was so narrow back there, and they had these glycol lines running. The 1.5 inches went down to like 3/4, and it's just begging to be broken, right? And it's sticking off like a foot, so it's like if you bump it, that thing's snapping. So there's a 3/4 inch, like, and like and so it was just shooting it out into glycol out into the restaurant. And so when I get up there, I feel so bad because he feels horrible. So he just has his thumb shoved in that break, and he goes, "Oh, we gotta turn the pump off on the chiller." And like I think he even like cut his thumb a little bit or something on it, trying to plug it up. So yeah, I mean, things can go sideways with that pub scenario, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You always hope that it's nothing super, super bad, but it's always a little bit sketchy. Especially, I always worry because I'll have some people come over and like want to chat while I'm working. And so I'm like, do you stop and not do anything? Because that's what they want to come over and see what you're doing. And I'm like, I do not want to spray you with anything. I do not want to get you dirty. I do not.
Sure.
It's definitely a different kind of setup, but it's nice to have that interaction with the community as well. So
definitely. Hey, and just to mention something that Rich Larson is mentioning in the chat. Actually, I had a conversation. He's mentioned a couple others. There was Jasper that was doing Brewery Life on YouTube to check out his stuff, because there is other pro content out there, and also Hendo at Rockstar Brewing. I had a call with him about 6 weeks ago. Super nice guy. And no, Rich, you are not raining on my parade. All right. But yeah, check those sources out as well. Hendo has a whole bunch of stuff going on. He has a whole other podcast. I can't remember off the top of my head on that, but definitely check those guys' stuff out. So getting back to kind of the tart fruit beer thing, those beers are really popping off right now. What do you think is the appeal of those beers?
Well, I think in our area, we didn't really have a lot of craft beer. We have a lot of, Coors, Miller, Bud Light drinkers that drink what's readily available. So I feel like a lot of what we've been doing is just trying to introduce them into some styles that they might like. And one of the things that have really drawn people are these, I don't want to say heavily fruited, but fruited drinks that don't maybe taste as much like beer, because that's my number one critique. Everyone's like
beer,
everyone's like, this is too hoppy, or this is too bitter, or whatever.
Sure.
And even malt character, like when people drink an amber, this is too malty. I'm like, well, that's the style. Like,
it is.
So getting people to just kind of step out of their comfort zone, and we've even gotten them, which seems like a weird transition for me, to go from a sour beer and try some of like our hoppier things. It's like once you start nudging them out of their comfort zone a little bit, they're more willing to like trust you and try some other things. So I think, and we also, the younger drinking crowd. So the kids that are, I say kids, they're not that much younger than me, but
we're showing our wisdom when we say kids.
So a lot of, the 22, 23-year-olds that come in, they might not necessarily be super big into actual beer flavored beer. Sure. So they want to try, they want White Claw and they want that kind of stuff. Well, we don't really do that. We have a hard lemonade, which will, make some of those people happy, but this kind of bridges that gap for them a little bit. It's got the sweet flavor, but it's still beer.
Yeah, and it is. And I think a lot of times, like, I think probably the best one of the best ones types that, or one of the ones that I've been most pleased with. We did a beer a while back, maybe a year ago or so, called Enigma, and it was we used lactose in that, and just tarted up some lactose. We had a good amount of fruit, but people like sweetness. And
Absolutely.
when there is, and I think like in my head, I always the beverage I'm thinking about is like fair lemonade, like carnival lemonade, where it's
Yeah.
the fresh squeeze. It's more sugar than you can believe going into that
Yeah.
cup, but it's so acidic, but it's so sweet, and it's one of those things. I think that's one of the reasons that it pops. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like this refreshing juice drink,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they are really approachable. They are super approachable.
Yeah.
So, well, listen. So, what has been the tart fruit beer that has moved the best for you over in Chill Coffee?
Well, probably I've done one that's called Hippie Trip, which is like a raspberry lemon one that people really, really liked. And the last time I put lactose in it, which made people like it even more because it took out some of that extra sour tartness and mellowed it out a little bit. But and then the one that I've done most recently that people really liked was a blueberry lemon. So it's like that kind of, which makes sense, kind of like that lemonade-y kind of flavor. But
so this is interesting because a fellow that I mentioned before, Andy, he's leveraging lemon in some of his fruit beers as well. So what is it? So if you're like you mentioned raspberry, blueberry, going with lemon. Talk to me about that thought process a little bit when you're putting those two fruits together.
Well, to me, it's like anything that's lemon, it needs a berry that might have a little bit of sweetness to go with it, because like right now when we do like fruit additions, if we use lemon or lime, we won't do more than 6 pounds per barrel. Like it's just way too much. It just instantly takes over. So adding it just kind of like evens it out a little bit. Kind of like if you do like, even like, I always think about desserts, which sounds weird when I make
No.
What things go well with dessert? So like if you do like blueberry pancakes, adding just a hint of lemon in there, it just like melds the whole process all together. It just kind of brightens it up a little bit and makes it more refreshing, kind of. So that's where I always think of adding like a little bit of lemon or a little bit of lime. It just kind of brightens up the flavors of the berries.
I like that because I think that's a real culinary approach. Like the way you're like the way you're looking, because you mentioned the dessert or whatnot, but it's one of those things. There's in when it comes to food, and then obviously crossover into beer, there's certain things that are like enhancers or magnifiers. So when you're making chocolate chip cookies, you're not making vanilla cookies, but there's vanilla in there to kind of smooth out and round out those flavors, right?
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting approach, but we're really talking about it like more on the acid side. As playing that role right there. I like that a lot. I have some questions in the chat with people talking, asking Jay Spies. I can't remember which one it is, but Jay, my man, Jenny, do you prefer puree or whole fruit?
We do mostly puree because we don't really have the manpower to process whole fruit. Every once in a while, we'll have the kitchen mandolin some like lemons for us, and we'll hang them in muslin bags and kind of steep those. But for the most part, we do pureed like Oregon fruit or aseptic fruit purees.
Spies, that's right. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm bad at that. But yeah, and so that was going to be my follow-up. So you've done aseptic puree and Oregon?
Yes, we actually just tried Fierce Fruit for the first time. I met
I pulled some stuff from them as well.
So I haven't actually got a final beer product from them yet. I literally just started using them last week. So but their product smelled good and tasted good.
So do you find, is there like you mentioned lemon, you mentioned raspberry, you mentioned blueberry. Do you have a and again, we're talking about an agricultural product, but do you like blueberry specifically from one as opposed to the other? Have you had enough experience across the brands? Do you have any go-to suppliers for certain varietals?
For most of my berries, I like Oregon fruit a little bit better, mostly because I feel like the color is a lot brighter and like makes my final product like more appealing colors.
Yeah.
Because I've done Hippie Trip 3 times now, and the first time I did it with all Oregon fruit.
Yeah.
And then the second time, Oregon was out because they have supply problems. Sometimes you don't always have the ones you want when you want them.
Right.
So I used aseptic. And the first time it was a very like bright red from all of the raspberry and strawberry and lemon that I put in there. And then when I used aseptic, it was a lot lighter. So it was like not as appealing visually, but it still tasted really good. So it was like one of those things too. I thought, do I cheat and add, some beet powder in there to make it good?
Right. You're bringing up some old wounds for me, because I had the exact same experience. I was getting, I got blackberry. We do a fruit beer. We used to do a fruit beer called Fuse. It was a rotating fruit beer handle, same base beer, different fruits.
Yep.
And when I did blackberry the first year, that stuff blew out the door. It was crazy. Yep. I couldn't make enough. The next year, I couldn't source the blackberry from Oregon, and I got it from aseptic. The color, and you almost hate to say, I feel as if the flavor was less as well.
Yeah.
But when you have that big of a difference in color, because it was just pink.
Yeah.
And like the year before, it was purple or blue. You know what I mean? Dude, people drink with their eyes so much. Absolutely. And it was so disappointing. And listen, I've used plenty of other fruit from what's it called? I use their pineapple all the time for our pina colada beer. But man, so it's funny that you mentioned the color in particular, because okay, well that's good. I need to see how this plays out in the future. So anyways, okay, cool. So you kind of prefer your berry stuff from aseptic or from Oregon?
Oregon fruit, yeah.
Oregon, okay.
And it is true. Everybody drinks with their eyes. If you make a really pretty beer, somebody gets it at the bar, everyone's like, what's that? I want that. Or even a weird color beer. Like we made a Head in the Clouds beer probably about a year ago now, but it was bright blue. Like bright blue. Like anytime you poured it, it stained we have white countertops. It always stained the countertops. The bartenders hated pouring that beer. But I mean, it would just fly. All of a sudden, every single person in there had blue beer in it.
Yeah, that'll happen. So we had, there was a beer that I used to make called Hollow Point, and we did, it was just a hibiscus beer. And so what we would use is we would do hibiscus in a cold steep in the bright. And it was really only 24 hours contact time, but I used 3 pounds per barrel. Okay. And it got like fruit punch, like the other, almost the other side of red, almost toward purple. And it was so, and like the foam was like bubblegum pink. And it's cool because everybody thinks it's a fruit beer then, right? Yeah. But it's hibiscus, right? So that's a little something, that I enjoy about it. But yeah, visually, people walked in and said, what's that? I want to drink that. It is a legitimate component of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely is.
So we talked about blending up fruit a little bit, using some lemon in there. We're going to come back to volumes of fruit when they're going in and everything like that. But let's kind of jump to the beginning of the process. I get excited and I start asking the questions that I'm really dying to get to. But kind of jumping back, what's your approach with as far as the grist goes for a beer like this? Is this a beer that you're looking to really push up malt flavors, or are you looking to kind of go with a little bit more austere grist bill?
Yeah, we don't really go with much malt character in this because I want the fruit to be the star of the show.
Yeah.
So we do about 80% Pilsner malt, so light in color, not a big malty character. And then we do 20% flaked, which lately I've really been liking flaked wheat in my sour beers.
Okay.
Gives it a little bit more mouthfeel and a little bit more head retention.
Sure.
My system, it boils really, really hard. So I have a hard
steam
time.
Or direct fire?
It's direct fire. We've even had it turned down multiple times, and
sure.
it goes hard and fast. So I have to watch it like constantly to prevent boilovers.
Yeah.
I also use firm cap, but as you know, the more firm cap you use, the less head retention you get.
Sure.
So anything that I can do to promote head retention and try to not use as much firm cap is what I try to do.
Sure.
So yeah, those neutral malts that don't have a lot of malt character, let those fruits really shine through, but give it a little bit of body.
Yeah. Are you using like a domestic pills or a continental pills?
We use raw pills for most of our stuff. That's just kind of a base malt that doesn't really. We don't need to add the extra.
It's super solid. It's super solid. You'll get good extract out of it, and
it works great in my system too. Like I really like it. It's my favorite.
Do you have a mill? Do you have a mill over there?
We buy all of the things in Chillicothe pre-milled. So
that is there are some things that's nice about that. So so does that mean that you're dumping into the mash tun by hand and then stirring by hand?
Yep. So right now,
how big of a system is it?
It's a 7-barrel.
7-barrel. Okay.
So right now I have an intern since I'm not lifting as much. But yeah, most of the time it's me, unless I can find one of the bartenders that want to come in early and help me dump. You kind of set it up on the rail and dump a little bit, and then you stir a little bit more. So it's definitely different because we don't have any kind of like auger system or anything that helps us get in. We're just dumping. So
sure. Okay, so 7-barrel system, direct fire, and you're stirring in that mash. What do you look and I agree with you, and maybe some people can take it another direction, but I'm always of the mind when if I'm trying to feature hops with IPA, just get out of the way. If I'm trying to feature fruit, get out of the way. There's probably some supportive things you can do, like you talk about, like you're enjoying flaked wheat right now. You feel like you get some, maybe a little bit of body, a little bit of mouthfeel out of it, foam retention out of it. Totally makes sense. But yeah, I think you can muck those things up too easily sometimes, right? By getting too complicated on the grist side. Yeah.
Well, and you end up wasting money on grain to go in your beer, so you're making a more expensive product that might not actually be making the product better, in my opinion anyway. But you were saying hoppy beers, this grist ratio, grain bill is pretty much what I use for a lot of my hazy hoppy beers as well. Just kind of neutral, let the hop shine through as well.
100%. Yeah, we're on the same page there. That's cool. And so when you get into the mash tun, are you guys playing around with water profile up there much at Chillicothe?
We have pretty good water for the most part for brewing processes in Chillicothe. The only thing I really add to my brewing water is a little bit of calcium, about 1 to 1.5 ounces per barrel.
Sure.
And then we add phosphoric acid for the pH. So for sours, we do about 0.25 per gallon.
Okay.
For all of our water, and then we also do a 45 mil per barrel in the whirlpool, just to help with keep the microbes down and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so you're kind of talking about hitting baseline limits for calcium in the mash.
Yep.
For the kind of the mash rest pH, what are you kind of gunning for with a beer like this?
For this, we want about 5.2.
Yep.
Nothing super fancy.
Yeah, no. It's straightforward. You're making sugar, and you're trying to keep all your processes happy, and all the little invisible science things happy too. So
exactly.
So yeah, that makes sense. And what temperature and how long of a rest are you doing for a beer like this?
Well, honestly, since we did our collab with you, we have been working on making our rests a little bit smaller.
A little bit shorter.
When we were talking, So I've gotten mine down to 30 minutes. So I was doing 45 before. I got down to 30. I haven't seen any kind of difference in the kind of extraction rate I'm getting. So right now for this beer, I'm doing about 150 for 30 minutes.
Yep. So a little bit on the leaner side, so you'll be able to. You're not throwing a whole bunch of long chain sugar at it then.
No. So we're getting both alpha and beta amylase still working at that temperature in that pH range. Sure. So going to be kind of medium bodied based on that. So
yeah. You know what's funny in the meantime, because we did have that conversation. I've been running back up. I've gone up to a 30-minute rest. So if some of you haven't seen my brew day videos, and sometimes I talk about it in there, I'll basically do like a 5-minute rest, and then just start circing. But now I'm paranoid that I'm not getting my efficiency. So I will say also this though. It's not bad to have that time in your day though either, because it lets me get hands-on with some other things. So it's not like it's that big of a deal. It doesn't change the length of my time at work. So that's a good thing.
That is the one thing I noticed, that 15 minutes doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I always do my heat exchanger sanitizing at that point.
Yeah.
It's like by the time I get it all set up and like get it started, I'm like, I don't have any time now. Like, so it's definitely different. You have to like manage your time really, really well when you start decreasing the times in between things. So
sure. But you haven't noticed anything going from 45 down to 30?
I have not. My brew house is pretty efficient as long as I don't try to do any kind of ginormous beers in it. When I start doing big stouts, it obviously decreases a little bit.
When does it start dipping off? Like what ABV range does it start to trail off at?
Anything over like 8%, it really starts taking a dive.
Sure.
7.5 is a little bit less. Yeah. But 8%, I really see a big hit. But for like these sours where I'm going 5.5 to 6.5.
Yep.
I'm getting like 85% efficiency in my mash tun, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
So
well, that's
cool. I haven't noticed any kind of decrease based on just the 15-minute.
Yeah. So you're gonna run that beer off over to your kettle. You've got kettle full, and let's start talking about what's going on in that kettle. Are you what kind of total IBU? What's going in hop wise? Kind of when is that going in?
We are not doing hops in our sour beer.
No.
I know. I knew you were going to say that.
Well, no, but here's the deal. This is what I always say, because I don't either. Sometimes I'm worried I laugh so damn loud. I'm worried about like blowing out somebody's ear with this microphone. But so the thing is we would always say we keep it street legal. We throw like we sometimes what I'll do is I'll take those, but we're on a 15 barrel, so it's even less. But we'll take like one of those 1 ounce packets that they'll send you for sensory. Yeah, we'll bust it up and sniff it, and then just throw it in. But that's what we always talk about. Whenever I'm recording a beer that's tart, I always show myself doing that because we do it all the time.
Yeah.
Because it has to have hops in it. But yeah, keeping it street legal. But yeah, I mean, the idea here is, what's the idea here with not really driving IBU in these beers?
Well, we use tropical IPA yeast and a lacto blend. So our lacto blend is very, very hop intolerant. So even like 2 IBUs can make this not sour based on the yeast that we use or the bacteria that we use. So we'll even go to the point where if we made a hoppy beer the beer prior, I will CIP my brew house because I do not want any residual hops in there to interfere with the yeast and working.
That's really interesting. And so now we're getting into it. So all right, so you're in the kettle, no hops in the kettle because that lactose strain can't handle it. And that's and there's different lactose strains. Some are more hop resistant than others, but none of them really want those IBU in there or anything like that. So there's no hops in the kettle. How long of a boil are you doing on this beer?
We are only doing 30-minute boils for our sours.
Okay. And is that specific to the sours, or are you doing that for other styles as well?
Just our sours. Everything else we pretty much typically, other than like huge beers, we'll do longer, but it's about 60 minutes is what I do for IPAs and stuff. But
yeah. So so the 30-minute boil, why the 30-minute boil?
We just really don't need to boil off any. What we get out of our mash is what we need. Sure. So we essentially just boil it long enough to feel comfortable that we're, getting it to that boil.
Yeah, killing it. Yeah.
And then we put in whirl flock and yeast X at 15 minutes. So essentially a 15-minute boil with an extra 15 minutes to put your whirl flock and yeast X in it.
Yep. And then process-wise, what's going on from there?
So we knock our beer out at like anywhere between 98 and 102.
Yeah.
We ferment pretty hot.
Yeah.
Which makes for also a nice short brew day. So you have a short mash, short boil, and a really fast knockout.
Yeah.
So, and then we put it right on our OYL 200 tropical IPA yeast and our OYL 605 lacto blend.
Okay.
Put it in the fermenter, and I leave the fermenter set anywhere between 100 and 102 as well.
So I am not familiar with the tropical IPA blend. Is that tropical? Is that Sac Trois or maybe? Yes. Okay, it is. I guessed. All right. Okay. So cool. So that Sac Trois, I mean, I'm trying to remember. That seems now to me the lacto just from the outside. Like I know lacto kind of like, and maybe this is a gross way to say it, but lacto kind of wants to be in the body temperature range. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like up in the 90s, you know what I mean? And I do know some go a little higher, but I didn't realize. So you're saying up to, what did you say? 110?
102.
102. 102. That's still high.
That's very high.
How does that feel? Is it the first
it feels like you're doing something wrong. Like when you feel, because, I don't know about you, my temperature gauge when I knock out, it slowly goes up. So I always keep my hand on it to see what I think the temperature feels based on my temperature as well. So when you reach down and touch that and it's hot, you always have that instant oh my God, what am I doing? I'm ruining this. Yeah. So it does take some getting used to. It doesn't feel like that's what you should be doing.
Sure.
And that temperature, I will tell you, is out of the range of what the tropical IPA yeast says that it likes.
Okay.
But we haven't had any issues with it not being viable. We repitch with this. We harvest it. I think we've harvested it up to 6 or 7 times to reuse. Okay,
so you're taking essentially a blended pitch of the lacto blend and the tropical IPA blend and so that's an Omega product.
Yes, they're both.
So Omega. you get an individual pitch of each one.
Correct.
And so it's a 7-barrel batch, and so are you getting a 7-barrel pitch of each one? How does that work?
Yeah, so what we do, it depends on whether I do it or Ryan does it. If Ryan does it, he gets a 10-barrel because all of his stuff is 10-barrel, and we still will split it back and forth. But I'll get a 7-barrel pitch, which lately we've been starting it at mine because it just makes sense to buy less and let it grow up.
Yeah.
But so I'll buy a 7-barrel pitch of each and just pitch them in there. And I will tell you, the lacto blend smells like chicken noodle soup. It is the weirdest thing ever to be putting in your beer. Not that I think any yeast really smells like fantastic.
Sure, yeah.
But it is a very odd smell. And being pregnant, it is almost like gagging smell when you put it in there.
Yeah.
It's very strong. But we'll just pitch those right into the fermenter and knock out
a 7-barrel pitch of each.
Yes.
Okay. So you're going into one of your standard fermenters.
Yes.
Okay, so you're running that lacto strain, and so this is I'm not trying to sound strange about it, but I'm building to some other questions. So
absolutely.
You're going into the cold side because there's some people in the chat that are saying, okay, so are we talking kettle sour? And then now we're realizing we're not talking kettle sour. We're talking a real lacto pitch, and the what's it called, Sacchois, the tropical IPA blend, that was even one that was that some people were a little sketched out by for a long time for leaving on the clean side. So do you have cooperage do you have stainless that is specifically for sour beers or these tart beers?
No, we do not. So we
talk to me about this. Talk to me about
everything in all of our. We don't do it in our production facility, mostly because we don't ever really want to run anything through our canning line with all of those soft pieces.
Yep.
That, to us, it's not worth it. So when we do sour beers in the production facility, we normally do sour Vissier, something that's a little less
aggressive.
Yeah.
Or stubborn, perhaps. Yeah.
So we just make sure whenever we do our cleaning processes, we do extra cleaning and we make sure we soak everything longer.
Yeah.
It's just making sure you have good cleaning practices between the two. I shouldn't say this because I probably will now, knocking on wood over here. We haven't had any kind of contamination issue so far.
And I mean, here's the thing. And like, there's so much of that I know is right. There's that individual paranoia thing where you're like, but I mean, let's be real. We're talking about a microorganism that you can kill with heat, temperature, chemical, X, Y, and Z. And so there's things you can do. You know what I mean? It's not like it's impossible, but a lot of times people do like to take that extra care. But yeah. So no, I think that's interesting. I know some different people that do that different ways. And like, as you mentioned, like that lacto that you're using is not the most robust stuff on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, well, wow, that's fascinating. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that you're doing that. So you're rocking that. Oh, and I'm this next question is that I'm like asking for like encyclopedic type knowledge, but that Sacchois, the tropical IPA, what you said you ferment above the range. What is the upper end of that range? Do you know just off the top?
85.
It's 85 and you go over 85.
We do.
You're wild.
It is already a pretty flocculation kind of yeast and doesn't. It has high attenuation, low flocculation, so it's like already kind of a difficult yeast to harvest off of.
Sure. But
with what we're doing, it seems to still work pretty well.
I'm sure it does.
The flavor profiles are exactly what we want from them. So
that's really cool. Now, so fermenting that warm, Spunding und Wirt asked about fermenting at that higher temperature with the in particular with the Sacchois. Do you ever feel as if you get like the typical things that we would be worried about, whether it be too estery, fusely, higher alcohol, boozy? Do you feel like that comes across with that at all?
We haven't really had that problem. It does sometimes get a little alcohol flavoring, but once you put the fruit in and it re-ferments out again, most of that stuff kind of goes away.
Kind of smooths out, you feel. That's really interesting. And now I'm going to jump forward. So when you will run one of these beers and grow it up essentially for Ryan over at the pub or whatever, how are you? So you're just pulling a slurry off the bottom of that tank.
Yeah, we have yeast springs that we send back and forth. So we have a delivery that goes from Chillicothe to Cincinnati. Every 2 weeks. So we just try to plan it to where I'm going to be able to harvest at a time that I can send it back to him and he can pitch it like the next day. Yeah.
So is that real? Does it really look like a slurry when you're harvesting that combo yeast mix that you have going on, or is it really lean looking?
The first few that you harvest, it is very lean looking. It's almost like beery, not really a slurry so much.
Because that's actually about what I was about to ask. Like, does it look like hef? Does it look like hazy IPA? Does it look like bad hazy IPA? Like, what is it?
It's definitely not like hazy IPA. You don't get any like the pretty cream color slurry. After you've done it a few times, you get a little bit more of that from like the tropical IPA yeast, like really thriving in there. Sure. But it's always still a little bit more on the thinner side.
Sure. And so when you're harvesting to send over to Ryan, what kind of metric are you filling up a brink? Are you sending over X volume? Are you doing anything on the lab side? What's kind of that practice?
We essentially get as much out of there as we can because where it is so hard to harvest, it's like as much as we can get without it being just straight beer that we're sending back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
With this one,
do you feel like you get like, do you get like close to a half barrel? Is it a half barrel brink? I should ask.
Yes, it's a half barrel brink. The first few you definitely don't. You get like half of a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're lucky if you get half of it. By the end, it wouldn't be easy to get like the third or fourth time you do it. It'd be easy to get most of the brink full.
Sure.
But with this, like the last one he gave me, I would say maybe 3/4 of the way full, and it took off the very next day. It was just going like crazy.
Okay, and so this is and this is why I'm so excited to talk to people, because you end up finding out so much stuff. And also, thank you for first of all, you're super well prepared, and I'm just having so much fun talking with you. Honestly, like I was like, well, okay, well maybe. Well, and also I'm feeling a little bad. I want to respect your time too. Sometimes I typically do around 2 hours, and then, but I was thinking tonight, I'm like, you know what, like maybe it'll end up being a little bit shorter because we don't know each other as much as like I've known some other people. But anyways, this has been a blast. So this is great. So you're running this stuff up at like 102. And so of course that's going to ferment fast. And Absolutely. So like, what's your, something that we didn't hit with this recipe, what's kind of a starting gravity that you're looking for, and expected final gravity?
Expected final gravity always gets down into like 1.5.
Yep.
So it just kind of depends.
1.5 Plato, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
So it just kind of depends. Sometimes I get up to like 14 or 15. Mm-hmm. If I want, a little bit more alcohol, but I try to keep it right there around 14 Plato starting gravity.
Sure. And so, what was next? Do you prefer these beers with lactose?
I don't. I do like my sour beer to be sour if I'm going to drink it.
Sure.
Sometimes I think it just mellows it out a little bit too much, but I always get the comments of this would be better with vanilla, or this would be better.
And it's always hard too. I hate to throw lactose in a beer if I don't have to, because then it means some people can't drink it. And you know what I mean? Like you don't want to limit your customer base, and maybe that's a little too narrow of a way to think about it. But yeah,
it's absolutely true. We have I think she's gone now, but we had a bartender in Cincinnati who, anytime we did a Women's Day beer, I was like trying to purposely plan it to where we did not put lactose in it because I knew she couldn't drink it. So
sure. And so what was something else that I was going to mention? So total fermentation time at that robust temperature of the low 100s.
We do about a week before we put any kind of fruit in. Sometimes a little bit less. We check it just to see if it's still going down, and then we'll put our fruit in, and then about another week we diac and crash it. So
okay, so
I can get the beer packed in less than 3 weeks.
Okay, excellent. So when are you harvesting? Because are you harvesting before fruit goes in there?
Yes. So
okay, and so that would also lead to a thinner slurry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely before it's really done, and it's still really, really warm. So we just try to put a little bit of pressure on the tank, get what we can out, and then we put fruit in. So we really need some of that yeast to still be in there because we re-ferment all of the fruit out. We don't have to.
And so that tank is ripping at 102 degrees. Will it maintain that temp? Because I mean, we're in Ohio. It's not like ambient's going to be keeping it up there. Well, is there a little bit of an arc with that? If you can talk to me about that.
Yeah, it definitely goes down. Once it hits about the week mark before I put the fruit back in, it's normally down to about 90.
Okay.
So knock it out around 102. The first few days, it's right there.
Oh yeah.
You're
It's loving
using
it.
your glycol to keep it down.
Yeah.
About the week mark, it goes down to about 90. Then you put the fruit in it, and it starts going back up a little bit. So typically, it's like 102 for 3 or 4 days. Gradually goes down to 90. Then I'll go back up to about 95, and then we just end up chilling it. By the time the fruit is re-fermented out, I'd say it's probably in the 80s.
Yep.
So it doesn't stay at 102 the whole time, but it definitely starts there.
Yeah, and I mean it's really all activity driven, right? I mean, I'm sure you can throw up you could put together a graph with the amount of sugar and how high the temperature is, and there's going to be some correlation there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's really great. So when you're getting fruit into a tank, how are you getting fruit into a tank?
So we'll sanitize brinks and then obviously push all the sanitizer out and then open the brink, put all of the fruit in, and then we put beer into it to push all the air out, and then just CO2 blast it back in. So depending on what size I'm doing, it's like 3 to 4 brinks full of fruit that I put in each sour that we
and
have.
So how many, and this is the dummy math I do. I do it by boxes. So how many boxes of fruit? Because that's the only I would have to write this down otherwise. How many boxes of fruit are going into a 7-barrel batch of this?
7-barrel batch is going to be about 5 to maybe 6, depending on what fruits that we use.
Yeah, nice.
I always get used to doing it because I always started on Ryan's. I'm like, it's 8 boxes. Well, that's for a 10-barrel.
Yeah.
So we do about 35 pounds per barrel.
Okay. And then, so with that, if we were talking like the raspberry lemon, how much of that is or blueberry? Oh, you said raspberry as well.
Yeah, we do raspberry.
Is there a particular ratio? Is it like 1 box of lemon and then the rest?
The rest would be your berries.
That's my buddy Andy's doing the same thing. Like just folding it in, like using using a little bit as like that accent, dude. I'm so excited about that. And you're getting your lemon from where?
It just kind of depends. If I'm getting stuff from Oregon already, I just go ahead and get a box of lemon from them.
Have you been pleased with the lemon from multiple suppliers?
Yes, I have actually. Lemon, anything that's like a light in color that you don't have to worry about the color as much, I haven't been too upset with any of the other suppliers. Like I said, yes, some of the berries are a little less fruit forward from some of the other places, but the color is what I feel like at least my customers really notice.
Sure. So you're fermenting that fruit out completely. And then we're getting over to kind of finishing the beer, the bright tank side. Something that I do at this stage is with a lot of my adjunct beers, I will accent with natural flavor with an extract. Do you do any work with extract on beers like this as well?
We do. Mostly with our sour beers, we stick with like vanilla or coconut. I have done a few. I actually did a blueberry maple pancake sour last year. That was really, a pretty big hit, which I got a lot of flack for, putting maple in a sour. People are like, that's going to be disgusting. But so we do some one-off weird things, but most of it we stick with like vanilla, or if we're doing some kind of tropical flavors, we'll add coconut extract. And it just kind of depends. To me, coconut is more like forward facing, so I do a little bit less of it than I would like a vanilla. Vanilla, I think you can be a little more heavy-handed with. But one thing, I actually have unitanks, so I don't have a bright tank. So if I'm doing any kind of extract, I have to make sure I pull as much stuff off. So after I crash it, I do 2 or 3 pulls of, any yeast that remains, all the fruit that remains, and then I'll have to recirc my extracts in the fermenter, and then I. So that's
Do you have any preferences for extract manufacturers?
Yes. We've been
By the
using
way, listen. So I just talk about things like it's just you and me sitting at the bar talking about things. If there's things you're not supposed to talk about or anything like that, that's
as far as
completely
like
fine.
we're very open of
Sweet. Okay, cool.
telling
I
our
just wanted to make
stuff.
sure I wasn't like painting you into
I
a
just
corner here.
I just always feel bad because I don't want to like knock on anybody else's stuff.
Well, you can just say who you like. You can just stay positive, unless you don't like any of them.
No, the vanilla that I like is vanilla. It's
Yeah,
probably my
yeah.
favorite vanilla
Yep.
that I have.
Yep.
And then a lot of our other extracts that I've been using lately are from Callison's.
Okay.
So like we've had their peach, which I don't know if you've had our peach lemonade.
I have not.
That's one of theirs. It's really, really good. It's very actual peach flavor.
Yeah.
So a lot of their stuff is really good as well.
I'm running a fair amount of Apex flavors. So
I haven't tried them yet.
they have some stuff. One of the ones that I think is best from them, I use it in my pina colada beer. But that beer does get real pineapple and real coconut. If you do want to do something with coconut and you want to have like a pureed type situation, Cholaka has a pureed coconut. Which I really like, and I've used a ton of it in that pina colada beer, and I think you get something out of it that you can't get from just the extract. There's like a softness, like a richness to like because coconut's fatty. There's like a fullness to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've made coconut beer for a long time, and it's always been extract. And when I was able to start using, I always said like the dream is to do both together, because I think with the real product, and I'm talking about making real production beer. I met a friend of a friend at one point, and he had a coconut beer that was outrageous, but it was like it was so much damn coconut that you couldn't make that beer. You can make it for your 4 barrels left over out of 10. That you can make it once a year for the pub. That's great. But if we're talking about making a beer that you like, a production beer, that's not possible.
Well, and that's that's one of the things I've realized lately too. It's like a lot of these things that we can do as smaller pub brewers, when you look at making recipes that you're going to scale up, it's like that is just not possible to do it in the big scale of things. You can't make a 60 barrel batch with as much fruit as we put in our little 7 or 10 barrel batches.
Sure. Absolutely. Oh, so just to clarify, there was a question about diacetyl rest. And I feel like maybe at those temperatures, it's not really as much of a, do you have diacetyl popping in those beers?
Every once in a while, if you don't get your fruit in early enough, we do have a little bit of a problem with diacetyl cleaning up because there's not enough yeast left that's still like viable in your beer.
Sure.
So you really have to kind of make sure you're getting it in there right at a week.
Sure.
Because we have, obviously, things happen in breweries if your fruit doesn't come in time, or
tell me about it.
You end up a little bit later. So we have had some issues where we had to like really try some different things to get it out. But for the most part, if we stick to our timeline of right at a week, we get our fruit in there with the temperatures that we ferment at, we don't have too many diacetyl problems. But
for sure,
just like anything, when you get your yeast riled back up with a dry hop or extra fruit, you run into some diacetyl issues. You just gotta be mindful of them.
Yeah. Are you guys starting to play with ALDC at all? Like that enzyme that's supposed to help stave that stuff off?
After CBC, we have been talking about it. We haven't done too much of it yet, but we are definitely looking into it.
Are you guys getting hop creep in your IPAs that go into can?
We have been noticing,
like in the fermenter. I'm not asking, are you guys having quality issues in the can?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, like, do you experience hop creep in the fermenter at the production, or and even in your spot?
Yes, at the production facility, we definitely do. In mine, I don't do as many IPAs as what we do at the production facility. We have West Coast and coast to coast going all the time in our big production facility. Sure. But yes, we definitely see it. So far, when we see it, we just try to wait it out and let it go. But yeah, since we went to CBC and had some of those IPA talks, we're definitely looking into doing a little bit of ALEC.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. A couple questions from the chat. Asking Spooning und Voet wants to know, do you feel as if those yeast stratify at all? Or does it just kind of like this homogeneous thing that you pull out when you're harvesting?
As far as you can really tell, I think it's pretty homogeneous at the bottom. It's not like you get a big, thick tropical IPA slurry and then you get some of the lacto. It does seem to all kind of homogenize at the bottom.
And Jay Spees wants to know, do you pitch that heavy because you're pitching hot and not getting that initial lag growth phase?
I mean, no, really. We just know that, we don't want to underpitch our IPA. So we want to put it in at 7 barrels, and the same thing with the lacto. We just want to make sure that we have what we need for the beer. So
sure.
Not really based on temp.
Sure. And so is this a process that was in place when you got there?
It was. This was something that they had tried a few different souring blends. Sure. And this is the one that they've decided that they like the best. So.
That's interesting. So the pH on this beer, and I'll kind of say ahead of time, like tracking pH as gospel in the same way that tracking IBU like gospel can be a little bit tricky. But how far down do these beers tend to go?
I mean, we can get them down into like the 3.5s, like 3.5.
Yep. So yeah, that's plenty tart, and I think you're probably driving some additional acid with those fruit additions as well.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So yeah, we talked about when we're getting fruit in there, finishing gravity. Is there anything special packaging wise? Do you like to carb these up a little bit higher, a little lower, just pretty standard, or what do you have going on there?
We do like to try to do it on the higher end of what our taps essentially can handle, somewhere around 2.57 to the low 2.6s.
Yep.
Having that extra carbon there just makes it a little like crispier, cleaner drinking finish.
Sure.
So
your draft lines don't like stuff much beyond that.
No.
That's a pain, man. That's a pain.
If you start getting into like the high 2.6s, that just starts not pouring quite as well as what you would like it to. Get a little more waste.
I carve up some of my stuff pretty. I carve up some of my stuff pretty high. I'll go. It's not out of the range for me to have something like at 2.7 for sure. But it depends. I mean, and especially like when I was doing a rice lager, I'll crank that damn thing up. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like get something in there. But yeah. Do you have issues with these? JSP has asked, do these fruit beers play havoc on your draft lines as far as with sediment? Do you really have to stick to a strict cleaning regimen with that because they get all gunky in there?
We don't have it too bad since we do ferment out most of what we put in. We don't have the big like smoothie like beers for the most part. And whenever mine are probably worse than what we do in Cincinnati because Ryan has a bright tank and I don't.
Yeah.
So we have to be really careful when we keg because whatever comes out of my fermenter goes into the keg. Yeah. Yep. So I do have a strainer with, different meshes on it. So I always use my finest mesh strainer and then just very, very careful when I'm turning the rack.
Have you ever used like a pectinase or anything enzyme that's supposed to help break that stuff down?
I have not tried anything like that. So far I haven't had too many issues. So
yeah. I feel like sometimes I've done those fruit beers, and so in 15 barrels, I think we were doing what were we doing? 12 or 15 boxes, 500 pounds roughly in 15 barrels.
Yep.
And it depends on how pectin dense that the fruit variety is that you're using. Absolutely. But I swear we would get some that would just keep a haze. and whatever. And sometimes that's nice to leverage with a fruited IPA. You know what I mean? Nobody's afraid to have some haze in those IPAs.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and I have used pectinase enzyme. The one I've used, it's supposed to be added to the fruit as it's going into the FV. I feel like I've had hit or miss success with it. But anyway, so I was just gonna ask you if you had used something like that.
We have not. I have not. I don't know if Ryan has tried it in the past or not, but
sure,
I haven't tried it.
Sure. Well, any other kind of big takeaways, big thoughts, advice on brewing beers like this, these fruited tart beers?
I mean, I feel like my biggest advice is just to be as creative as possible. Like, different flavors blend well together that I feel like people don't even really think about. And I always, like I said, I draw my inspiration from different kind of desserts. Sure. So, like this winter I did a spiced plum pie sour, which everyone was like, what is this? Like, why are we doing? But it turned out delicious. We did it in the wintertime. It was like a Christmassy kind of thing. Like, so taking some risk and doing some things that people might not necessarily expect in a fruited sour. Because we always have a hard time. We always want fruited sours on because, like I said, Chillicothe has a big request or demand for them. But I have a hard time doing a tropical sour in the middle of winter. It's like, you want to have a pina colada sour in the middle of winter? To me, that's very summery. Like, not that it isn't going to be good all the time, obviously. But so trying to find some of those different things. I did like a peach cobbler sour one time in the middle of like fall. So just being adventurous with your flavors. The hardest part for me is finding some of the fruits that you want to try in those months. But
Sure. Well, listen, Jenny, this was absolutely fantastic. I want to thank you for making the time. I know we were talking about getting kids to bed before we got in the stream, so I appreciate you taking some family time to sit down and talk beer with me. And as always, I always at the end of these, I don't know, like I get a little sentimental. It's just very I'm very grateful that you'd be willing to take the time and really just be so forthcoming with what you have going on over there at 50 West, and just sharing your experience and your thoughts on anything from, the education side of things to the brewing side. So I had a blast talking to you tonight.
I was very nervous about doing this, but you made it really easy.
Well, I spend so much time with my mouth wide open, laughing that loud that you tend to forget that you're doing other things. You're like, is he going to do it again? But yeah. So, well, I'm glad you feel that way. And then, I'm just gonna remind people you can't see it anymore because I zoomed in our cameras, but please go ahead and check out that Blickman stuff if you need pro side stuff, if you need homebrewing side stuff. Check it out. They've got it. And what does 50 West have coming up? You guys have a ton of stuff coming out in package. You guys are all over the place. You guys make everything from baller lagers. Ryan poured me a German Pils over there for that collab that was actually simply burn it down amazing. And so I know you guys have good things going on over there. Do you have anything exciting coming up this summer?
We have our Vitermobile coming out here pretty soon, so that's always a fun one. It's a classic that people really enjoy. And then we're gonna have a Long Strange Journey coming out soon too. Nice. All that's coming up in August, so we're gearing up to brew all those here pretty soon. And then as far as events go, we're going to have sand volleyball in Chillicothe. So they shut down 2 or 3 blocks of streets and have sand volleyball right out in front. So
man, home base, the home base balls out with that thing, man. That's crazy to see all those people in the sand drinking beers. Man, that's paying some bills, baby.
That's what they essentially are trying to bring some of that, fun that they have there to our Chillicothe location, since we don't really have that big outdoor area that Cincinnati does. So.
Dude, I think that's such a big part of the puzzle. I really
Absolutely.
do, because you know what? I mean, there's places to go. There's places to go that you're inside the bar or you're whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And somebody from maybe it was Other Half, I listened to an interview with a couple years ago even, and they said that they're in the hospitality industry. And that's actually what we're doing.
Yeah.
And yes, we're making beer, we're brewers, we want to be great at that and everything like that. But from a business standpoint, we're a hospitality company.
Yeah.
And we have to provide an experience that's unique. And
Absolutely.
so anyways, but yes, thank you so much. Hold on for just a second, because I will end the live stream, and then I'll just thank you again a million times before we jump off. But everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Hit up Blickman. I am going to be doing a live stream at the beginning of June. You know, the Q&A that usually comes up. But life has been a little bit wild lately, you guys. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the 7th or the 14th, but it'll be one of those days coming up. So just keep an eye either on Instagram or sub up to the channel, and you'll see those things coming through there. So Jenny, once again, thank you so much. This was fantastic. And
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good night, everybody. End broadcast.